So here we go, the Spanish into their third and final game in the Southern League at Oxford, and let's see what the Celtiberians would do against a much more exotic and non-traditional classical era opponent than their previous two textbook sort of Hellenistic armies. And this was against the Xiong Nu, a Chinese kind of steppe army. Whenever I think of it, I think of cataphracts, but fortunately this army, or fortunately for my infantry army, it didn't really feature too many. It was under the control of Mr. Fairhurst. I think you'll be able to see, those of you who know the circuit, will know some Fairhurst painted pink mixed formation Chinese infantry there with crossbows and spears. You've got some medium foot here, you've got a few tribal warriors, and you've got some sort of Mongol steppe type cavalry. They've gone for that kind of mounted horse archer option rather than the chunk through the middle kind of cataphract option. Not sure if that's a date thing or a choice thing, but still pretty solid. And the terrain here, I've done a reasonable job of doing that narrowing the table thing that I want to do. This is a hill which is going to be filled, I'm sure, with enemy before I can get up to it. Here's some terrain, but really only works for me if I'm being defensive, and not too much on that flank, but they don't have too much here. It's really, you know, these chaps have got, I guess, the potential to run around the flank, but the rest of this army in front of the baggage there, these should be very, very vulnerable indeed to my, you know, hard-hitting, hard-charging, dense formation infantry. They do tend to skittle over these mixed formations of shooters as long as they can get in without taking too many hits. And there's quite a lot of outnumbering going on here as well. A lot of points stacked up in these good quality cavalry. So let's have a look at the list here. So here it is in detail. That command on the left is 4 heavy cavalry bow elites, a couple of medium cavalry bow, 2 light horse bow. That's a big swing round your flank and engage and beat enemy cavalry kind of command. You've then got the command which must be on the right, 3 medium swordsman armor, kind of unusual, and they're going to be pretty tough if they get uphill. A light horse and a medium cavalry, kind of an outrider thing, a couple of medium sword impetuous tribals and a couple of light infantry bow, and then an actual Chinese ally, which is the mixed foot. They're heavy infantry sword bow, which is actually better than it could be. They're not medium foot, and heavy infantry sword do neutralize my my impact from my impetuous guys if they charge in, and a backfill, I guess a backstop, a medium cavalry crossbow as well. He's going to be tough to use in that central position. So let's see how the game moves and develops. So what happens, in order to get some of my guys forward, I'd actually put an ambush into this bit of terrain, so they jump out as soon as they can, and suddenly this outrider thing of a light horse bow and a medium cavalry crossbow suddenly look like they're a little bit overwhelmed. They can hold off a lot of things, but 3 infantry is pretty tricky for them. So hopefully I can start to put pressure on these guys and pull this lot apart. But by the looks of it, they've already made it up the hill by the time I even took this first photo. As we say, we've surprised them by having a real ambush. It's rare to see a real ambush a lot of the time, so when it happens, it does have a genuine surprising effect. It does work out quite well. In the centre, I think it would appear actually there's a piece of terrain that may be missed out of the first photo. It's got an ambush in it, might even be a marsh if we're lucky, so that does really prevent these cavalry coming around the flank. So the shooting cavalry, they will find it tough to beat up a unit of solid heavy infantry, a couple of elites in there, so they are going to probably get involved in a frontal fight that they don't really want, that I probably can win with attrition. These guys do look a little bit quivering and pink. The terrible cart of doom is keeping pace. I've not lost control here. I don't have to charge these cavalry. It should be a bit easier to maintain control than in the last one. There's no rows of skirmishers in front, because if they're in front, they get in the way of the shooting, I guess, and so it's not quite so easy to use with this army as the pikemen in the last game. So what's happening here? My surprise flank march has just chased away some of these cavalry. They don't really stand. So as the rest of the Lusitanians move up, these guys on the hill have suddenly got a lot to do, a lot of challenges. I may have taken some shooting hits from someone before they fled, but there's a lot of infantry here already behind the flank of this formation, so you can be uphill as much as you like, but if there's that many Lusitanians around your flank, that's going to be a bit of a problem for you. Into the centre, the cavalry are pushed forward and are starting to engage my guys. The shooting here, has obviously started to happen. Some of my skirmish screen is taking some of the hits. It looks like one of these guys must have taken a hit and I've dropped him behind. There's another couple of hits, looks like some hit markers there as well. So the shooting's having a bit of an effect, but nothing too terrible, and we're getting kind of closer to it with what's created a reserve, and the cavalry is still unable to push through this bit of difficult terrain. So as we get closer, it looks like because of this terrible flanking position, it's tempted, and also because of the impetuosity of these different types of infantry, it's tempted them to come down off the hill, and you know, they can sit up the hill, they get overwhelmed, they come down the hill, they fight, and then they're not quite such an advantage, but they're not going to get wrapped up by these guys. It looks like these two tribal units have split up, and one of them has taken on that injured guy and run him straight over. Asiatic warrior beats Iberian warrior. There you go. But here, there appears to be some guy who's gone already. One of the armoured spearmen has been run over, and there's an overlap here. These light horse are not really going to enjoy themselves against my infantry. This is a bit of a crash. Looks like I've taken more hits there, but sheer weight of numbers is still looking okay here, because there's only 3 real combat units here, even with the cavalry pushing back. It's quite tricky on this flank, but I guess they are at least making sure the battle happens here and not parallel with the hill. It's going to make it difficult for my guys to fight through quickly and then get into the flank of those mixed crossbow heavy swordsmen if that ends up being necessary. So let's have a look here. The cavalry again, they've pushed forward, they have forced my infantry to stop and fight them there. That has actually given me a bit of an issue here, that these guys have just decided to drive forwards, bearing in mind that the cavalry are fully occupied. I think that's a general, so there's no one really to threaten their flanks. They've gone in with an overlap, and they've actually taken a bit of a kicking. These are ordinary, they're ordinary. That's the elite one, who's obviously doing well. I think that's a stack of 2 or maybe even 3 markers. But these swordsmen are actually holding their own at the moment, and all of a sudden, with hit markers there as well, they've obviously taken a bit of a battering from the crossbows. I think it might even be a red one somehow, unless there was a cavalryman there. So they're in trouble. The cart doesn't fancy it. That's going over to join these guys here. Perhaps it looks like some of those armoured swordsmen are even facing this way. They may be there. Maybe we'll see them in a minute. And yeah, so they're doing really, really well. Much better than you would think they would do for mediocre troops against my hard charging infantry. So yep, it does look like there's a bit of a battle and a bit of a scrap going on there, with some guys still on the hill. But one of my infantry's gone. These tribals are doing particularly well. Other guys here have driven off the light horse and are racing over here. So this is actually a bit of a wash, really. You know, the weight of numbers has been outweighed by some heroism, but with 2 hits there, suddenly that now looks very vulnerable. These guys are all now intact. There's nothing. So actually, this guy could suddenly find himself on his own, and it looks like by racing off over here, we've managed to hit that other sort of loose cannon tribal infantryman in the flank and take him out to give them a lot of dominance in this part of the park. So what's happened here, I suspect that may be a general who's been unwisely thrown into combat to shore up these guys, and now the mediocrity that in combat, you know, they're good at shooting, but the payoff for that is that they count as mediocre, and that is starting to stack up. That's definitely a couple of markers. That's definitely 3. That's a yellow edge 2. That's a 3. So these guys are all right, but there's a hole there that's been reinforced by these. But again, my army, because it's got a little bit disconnected, it is giving away flanks to the enemy in terms of trying to get into them. This is just all about trying to win a battle of attrition now against a smaller enemy, much smaller enemy army. So yeah, the clever quality swordsmen are gone. These tribals are now going to get mugged, hopefully, and sheer weight of numbers here. But how can I actually push this advantage here, given that these guys are still fighting away on the hill? And suddenly my impetuous command is spread out over quite a lot of distance. It's in 3 different groups. It may be hard to get them back together to do much more once, hopefully, they wrap up against these tribals. So here we can see, pushing these cavalry even further back, we push the cavalry into terrain, so the cavalry are completely screwed now. They really can't take these guys on in the open. The cart has come through to finish off the tribals by the looks of it. These guys are still holding on up the hill, but now I'm starting to get reinforcements back in, starting to drive these light horse away. Looks like more heavy infantry have gone in and forced those cavalry away, which must be giving me overlaps against those mixed swordsmen and crossbows over there. So yeah, here we go. The proper quality Celtiberians have broken through. These guys are still doing nip and tuck. But you know, that's now starting to be a big gap, and if he can carry on chasing those away, it frees him up to roll up that line. There's a possibility of racing for the baggage as well, so that's probably the decent breakthrough, with these cavalry likely to still be being neutralized in a fairly even fight. And here these guys have been doing phenomenally well, hanging on up the hill against greater numbers. This guy's nearly red edge, nearly at the edge of death, but you can suddenly see that after that gap, there's been a chance all these guys have suddenly pushed forward, and this chap's are very, very badly exposed now. You know, even if they do record a quick win against these guys, they're going to get crushed as well, and it will end up being all of the combat infantry here on this hill, and at least, you know, that end of the heavy infantry line will have been swept away by the tide of Spanish Iberian charging warriors. And at the same time, we're still toughing it up against the cavalry. They've not really managed to break through, but here you can see suddenly, you know, they kept a solid line, they kept shooting, they kept doing their best, but bang, as soon as they do start to collapse, there's some massive holes, and then the heavy infantry do start absolutely rolling them up, hitting them in the flank, just through sheer weight of numbers and pushing even more people forward as these cavalry just neutralized and haven't really managed to get into the game. So yeah, that's pretty bad. If you're mediocre, you're dressed in pink, you've got a sort of slightly weird red hat thing going on, and then you're being hit in the flank by some heavy infantry Spanish warriors, that's just not a good place to be. They're toughing it out, they can hang on. The cavalry are trying to fight my Celtiberians, but sheer weight of numbers is really starting to give too much attrition to these this Xiong Nu army, or whichever it is, steppe nomad army that's got too many infantry in it. Really, it probably needed to be more mobile and have a bit more use of some open steppe terrain. It's a damn good job there weren't cataphracts. That would have been a very good game, but no, with all the infantry kind of wiped out and swept away, it's a second victory out of 3 for the Spanish to give the army a rather surprising 4th place in the competition this weekend. So that, my folks, is a wrap.